Welcome back to the EV Life podcast. I'm your host, Crystal.
I'm Hannah Neal.
And in today's episode, I get the pleasure of chatting with Richard and Nicole Ivity.
Yeah, so Richard and Nicole have been on a really cool adventure across Canada and Alaska in their EV for the last 18 months. And they are going to share everything about what that's been like.
Yeah. And, they've covered almost 80,000 kilometers over the past 18 months. So they're just a wealth of knowledge of what it's like traveling through remote locations and everywhere in between with an EV. So I do think you'll find this episode to be really informative and just interesting. As always, if you have thoughts on the episode, you can connect with us in the EV Life group on the AMA mobile app.
Yeah, enjoy the episode.
Hi, Richard and Nicole. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, pleasure. Great to be here.
Hi, Crystal. Thank you so much for having us.
So I'm really excited to talk to you and learn about your EV road trip across Canada. But can you just get us started with a little bit of background on your personal journey with EVs and what sparked the idea for you to embark on this great Canadian EV road trip?
Yeah, sure. We'd be happy to share on that. The project's been in the works for, I think it was about 3.5 years of planning. We were on the road for 18 months, so almost a 5-year plan. My background in EVs was that I was hired on as a project manager to do electric vehicle charging implementations. That was coming up on 8 years ago, this upcoming summer. And throughout that journey, we learned everything about kind of the industry on how it all fits together and different use cases for charging, and learned a whole bunch about that. Became one of the leaders in the lower mainland of BC with that information. And then throughout as COVID was starting to ramp up, Nicole and I decided to kind of break off on our own and start our own consulting company, which is Exigent Endeavors. And that one specializes specifically on car charger implementations, but also with kind of being a cat wrangler of all the different parties that go into those kinds of projects. So started a consulting firm, and then about 4 years ago, I heard about Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars, Ewan McGregor, doing a thing called the Long Way Up, where he drove electric bikes with a couple of crazy electric trucks named Rivians, from Argentina to California. And Nicole and I kind of very motivated and spurred on by that project and said, well, Canada's a pretty large place. What if we double the size of their trip? Theirs was, I think, 11,000 miles. And getting back to Vancouver next week, ours will click in just shy of 50,000 miles. We've driven pretty well everywhere you can go on a road, and some that wouldn't be considered roads, coast to coast, from Vancouver to Labrador to Vancouver Island to Fairbanks, Alaska, to right now on our last destination, which is the middle island of Haida Gwaii. We're right next to Skidegate. And then we turn around essentially today and head back to Vancouver for our final stretch.
So you're on the last leg of your journey. When exactly did you start?
Yeah, well, we picked up the truck on May 1st, 2023, and took about a month around the Vancouver area, just kind of getting ready and preparing, and then we headed north from there. So we've been on the road since then, first destination was north, and then we were around Vancouver and Alberta a little bit, and made our way out east from Vancouver again on I guess that was beginning of August 2023.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's been quite a long time on the road, and it's been an incredible experience for sure.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you picked up the truck. Can you tell us a little bit about what vehicle you decided to use for this trip and why you chose that particular car?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're driving a Rivian R1T electric pickup truck, first generation. We wanted a vehicle that was going to be large enough, comfortable enough, with a good enough range that we could make this journey and basically live on the road, have all of our stuff with us. We also have a rooftop tent on the back of it. And with the design of the truck, the rooftop tent sits below the cab, so it doesn't create any extra drag. which can be an issue with EVs for sure for looking at range. But yeah, we love the mentality of the company. They're all about adventure and sustainability, and their values really spoke with us. But yeah, it just felt like the right vehicle for the job. We couldn't really see it working as well in a smaller vehicle, and that's just for us because the style of travel we're doing. Like we literally have everything we need with us at all times. So,
And so
yeah.
you're obviously, you're cross country driving with this car, but you're also camping out in it, right? Sleeping in there.
Mm-hmm.
So you needed that extra space.
Yeah. So a bit of extra gear. Yeah, the rooftop tent is amazing. It's a great way to camp. It's super fast to set it up and take it down. And yeah, we've found different ways to charge using campgrounds. So that's been a huge game changer into getting into more remote spots. We love to utilize the RV plugs, and we've got adapters for all of it.
Yep.
We also got an electric blanket too. So that was a bit of a game changer hack for camping with an electric vehicle too.
Stay extra warm. I was going to ask what challenges you kind of faced on this journey, because we do know there are quite a lot of charging deserts across Canada. And, Richard, you mentioned that you all traveled pretty much anywhere a road would take you. And in some places, people might not even consider that a road. So how was it finding charging?
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic because even since we left, which was as of I think November 23rd, officially 18 months we've been on the road in this truck. Since we left, the infrastructure across Canada has gotten significantly better. When we started in BC, we went up the Alaska Highway first. We were calling folks on the Cassiar Highway. That was May 2023, and everyone said, please don't come up here. Like, we're not set up for car chargers. There's no infrastructure. There's no chargers. It's all on diesel generators. Like, there's nothing we can do for you. Don't go this way. Go the Alaska Highway way. So we did that. As we were leaving Vancouver the first time, Nicole was looking online for what she was saying, like an RV plug charger. So it's called a TT30. And you can buy one at Canadian Tire, but that's wired for an RV. And the EV ones are wired backwards because they're charging like a battery charger in a vehicle, not like a fridge or a microwave, that kind of thing. So as we were driving out of the city, we'd already checked out of where we were staying. Nicole found one on Facebook Marketplace from a guy that had a Tesla, bought one for a friend who didn't need it. And we left with that. And if we didn't grab that one little article of accessories for camping charging, we'd be in a whole different ball game of how that trip would have gone, because it's saved our skin quite a lot of times. When we first went up the Alaska Highway, there's a lot of Flow fast charging stations, and they were some of like I think it's just that they were beginner generation ones that didn't have information on Rivian specifically. And so they wouldn't actually charge our car. So when we got there, we found that out the hard way. Plugged in, called Rivian for an hour on their helpline, nothing. Called Flow for an hour on their helpline, nothing. We walked across the street to an RV park in Watson Lake, Yukon, of all places. And this guy, who happens to be a retired submarine engineer, happened to have a product that he called a pigtail adapter. So it's two of those TT30 plugs on one piece, and then that connects down to a level 2 plug. So you can actually pull like 35 kilometers of range an hour out of that thing and add an RV.
What are the odds of running into this person in this situation?
I know. Yeah, it was I mean, we'd heard about that adapter. There was one other guy who'd showed it to us.
Yeah.
But I mean, if we wanted one, we would have had to order it online and wait and try to figure out shipping. But yeah, we just so happened to come across a guy who had a whole stock of
Yeah, he had them in stock in a box. He actually talked to the original Rivian team who went up to Alaska to show that could be done. And they also got stuck at those exact same stations and walked across the exact same street and talked to the exact same guy. And he's like, okay, I'll sort you out.
He knew what he was doing. He knew everyone coming through there with a Rivian would get stuck.
Yeah. Kind of, sort of.
Yeah.
Kind of funny. And so that first leg was educational. That was definitely some range anxiety on that one. And as you said, there's a couple of different charging deserts. The area from Winnipeg to Sudbury is still pretty lagging behind with charging.
Mhm.
If you're not on really major corridors through the prairies, it's a little bit spotty. Like maybe there's one or two stations that aren't on either Highway 16 or Highway 1. So you have to be just cognizant of that. Um, and then the Maritimes and pockets need a lot of work. But since even that we left, it's just exploded so much. Like we got back to BC at the beginning of September, went to Vancouver Island, which has gotten a whole bunch of new chargers, and then wanted to do the Cassiar Highway. And for the Everything Electric show, which I'm sure you've heard about, BC Hydro had like I don't think it was a mandate per se, but a pretty strict guideline to have as many chargers as they could activated before that show. And so right around the end of August area, they lit up pretty much every major highway in BC. So at this point now, the longest distance between two fast chargers is 140 kilometers. And that's the Cassiar Highway, that's Haida Gwaii where we are, that's Vancouver Island, Bella Bella, like all these remote places that really take a lot of effort to get to. BC Hydro's got a station there ready and waiting for an EV driver to come charge up. So you can go pretty well everywhere in BC at this point. And that's just in 1 year.
Right. Yeah, that's quite an impressive change in just 18 months. And so you shared that you kind of experienced that range anxiety in Alaska. How often were you experiencing range anxiety as you were on this journey?
I'd say it popped up a few times. Definitely that first stretch. We had a time where we hadn't quite got our calculations down, and we were like, okay, are we going to make it? How long do we need to stay at this charger and charge versus how late are we going to be at the event we were planning? And we got to this charger, there was already somebody there, so it's going at half speed, like that all threw it all off. But yeah, I think it only really happened a couple other times, like real the anxiety of it. I think, yeah, in the prairies, we were encountering a lot of broken stations. So that was an unpredictable factor. We use PlugShare to look for stations and make sure we know where we're going, and that we've planned that out and that it's working, and people are getting the speeds they're supposed to. But yeah, I would say that the prairies were a little bit of anxiety. Newfoundland too, we got a little bit lazy and left a charger we knew was working at 50%. So we're like, oh yeah, the other ones will be fine. And sure enough, they were all down. But luckily, there's level 2. We made it, but it was slow going.
Yeah, it's kind of the opposite of range anxiety. Like range laziness. It's like, what are the odds that 2 fast chargers in a row happen to be broken?
What are the odds that 3 in a row?
So, you mentioned that you plan out your journey, and speaking to a lot of people who do long distance driving with EVs, they really map out their journey to make sure that they're getting to chargers before that range anxiety kicks in. But what happens when you get to a charger and it's broken? And are you sort of like preparing for that? Or are you factoring that in, like, okay, if we get here and this one's broken, we can still make it to the next one and hopefully that one's working?
Definitely, yeah. I think Richard likes to put it as ABC, always be charging.
Right.
So we definitely, we have found that it works way better on longer distance drives to stop more frequently, shorter stops, especially like with all these new BC Hydro chargers. We were stopping at almost every single one to just like test them, get a PlugShare check in so that other people have the information. And we did find a few that didn't work. And luckily, we'd stopped enough times and charged enough that it wasn't a factor at that point. So yeah, that was how we kind of worked on that. But yeah, we do some degree of planning, and also we try and be flexible as well, because we know that it is still new. Things can be unpredictable. But I mean, like for instance, we found a campground that we weren't expecting. We were waiting for, there was a fast charger available in Tok, but we found a campground unexpectedly that had power available, and because of that, we're like, oh well, we don't need to wait till the next day to charge up. We can go way further than we had originally planned. Tomorrow.
Talk about where that was.
Oh yeah, that's a pretty cool one. That's up in Tok, Alaska. They don't have a fast charger like that's public, but they have their local bus driver. He got some electric school buses, or one electric school bus on a grant, and installed a charger. And it's on PlugShare, but if you get in contact with him, you can schedule a time where he'll let you go into the bus barn and charge up there.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah. But that is one place that has a large gap. And without him doing that, you wouldn't be able to continue on to Fairbanks, most EVs. There'd be a couple that could make it. So we were going up and back. So yeah, with this campground that was open, we were able to charge overnight instead, and then we caught the bus barn on the way back down.
Yeah, and that's like right after the Yukon border. So there's Beaver Creek, which is the most western community in Canada. Like 20 minutes after that is the Yukon-Alaska border. And then the next charger after that is the Bus Barn one, which is a slow one. And then I think it's about 200 and some kilometers after that is the next like publicly accessible one. So if you don't catch that guy or happen to have a charger that can top you up overnight at the RV campground there, you're not making it, especially in colder temperatures. Like we were up there about a month ago. It was already down to 15 degrees below zero. We camped at minus 14 with that electric blanket, which is kind of crazy. And it was surprisingly balmy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like the spaces that you can't go at this point, I would say are significantly less than where you can go. And we did a presentation with the Electric Vehicle Society about this trip at the beginning of the month here. And Nicole spent a whole bunch of time creating a map of all of our charging sessions across the country. So we have a map for 2023 and for 2024. And it's every single level 1, level 2, level 3, and RV campground charging location that we've done both on the way all the way out to Labrador and all the way back from it. It's like 610 charging sessions at this point.
Yeah, I was looking at that map before our interview, and it's quite impressive and really handy for people considering going on their own EV road trip across Canada.
Yeah, absolutely. It's certainly a great reference point to see where we went and how we managed to get where we did. But also be sure that you're checking up-to-date information, because things can change all the time. Like what we experienced is going to be very different probably than the next EV driver who does a trip like that. Because there'll be chargers that weren't working for us that will work for them. Yeah. There'll be chargers that were not there when we were passing through that are there now. It's speed is increasing, availability is increasing. It's all just getting way better.
I would say one of the biggest things to keep in mind is if you're at a working station and the conversation is, do we wait the extra 10 minutes and top up that extra little bit so that we have like a plan B if something goes wrong? Or should we hit the road now? Wait the 10 minutes.
Yeah. So I'm just curious, how much range can you get out of your Rivian, and what's the typical charging time like? And I know it really depends on if you're at level 2, level 3, if you're using the slow chargers, but just on average, how long are you spending charging, and what's sort of that overall range that you get, and how does it, I guess, shift with the weather?
Yeah, those are big questions. The truck itself is a 135 kilowatt battery pack. It's the large pack model from 2023. I think they've changed around their trims a little bit. Their standard pack, I think, is 95. And then their the biggest one goes up to like 150. So out of our truck, in prime operating conditions, so going the speed limit on relatively flat ground, in decent temperature, we've maxed it out at about 525 kilometers. It's more regularly like 480, give or take. And then one of the biggest questions that we've been getting across the country is, how's your truck work in the winter? And it's been interesting because as born and raised Edmontonians, we know winter. Like this, we lived in Vancouver for many years, and it gets down to like -2, and the city shuts down, and it's a snow day. And I think in Edmonton, the law is that if it's not below -40 without wind chill, kids have to walk to school because it'll toughen them up.
No snow days in Alberta.
Which is crazy. So people are saying, well, how's it work in that temperature? And we went all across the country, all the way up to Labrador. The coldest we saw last year was -17 for 2 days in Halifax. They also got 7 feet of snow in 3 days, but -17. And when you're in a place where that temperature is warm after it warms up by 35 degrees, and that's the coldest you get, like for us, that's hardly even cold. So we don't really know yet exactly how it's going to go at minus 30, at minus 40. There are lots of Rivians who have done reports that they say minus 30 or below, it's kind of like a 40% range drop. What we were witnessing at minus 15, we were up in Fairbanks, minus 17, that it was about 25, 30%. So instead of 480 kilometers, it was more like 400 kilometers. We kind of assume that at minus 30, it'll probably be more like 350, 325 kind of thing. That being said, there's no idling. You're not idling your car to warm it up. If it's on, it's on. And one of the interesting things that we found was if you even plug it into like a 110 outlet, just like your laptop, just the nature of having the vehicle plugged in overnight keeps the battery warm enough, kind of like a block heater, that you don't have a lot of range loss for the truck to warm up its battery cells when you start driving that next day. So simple thing. The 120 for our truck was giving us around 4 kilometers of range an hour, 4 to 5. Those RV plugs went from the single plug at 10 kilometers of range an hour to 35 with the dual plug. And then the level 3 stations vary so much. Like there's the 25 kilowatt stations. That's like 125 kilometers of range an hour. And then the fastest we charged up was a Rivian branded charger in the US and a Tesla charger. Both did about 220 kilowatts, which is just around 1,000 kilometers of range an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the fastest we charged up the battery from 10 to 90 was like 18 minutes or something like that. And then if you're doing a 25 kilowatt station, it takes, honestly, you're plugging into those to get to the next fast one.
Mm-hmm.
You're not plugging into that to like, okay, well, I'm going to sit here for 8 hours to top up my truck.
Yeah.
You're just kind of just getting enough to get you to that next one.
But yeah, I would say on average, our charging stops are usually around 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes.
At fast chargers.
Fast chargers,
yeah.
Which we're using mostly these days because they're just available so much now. There'll be the odd time where we'll stay longer, but it's usually when we're doing something else. It doesn't really feel like we're just sitting there waiting for it to charge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So while you were on your road trip, you did something kind of interesting called EV cars and coffee meetups. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly. The concept of this whole trip was how do we take our information in the EV charging space, working in there for multiple years, and be able to take one of the world's most advanced pieces of transportation technology, the Rivian, across the country so that other provinces wouldn't have to go over the same hurdles that BC has gone to be able to kind of lead the way in EV charging. So can we take our information and a vehicle that's going to turn heads across the country to help speed those things up? So that's kind of where that whole thing started. And the best way to do that, in our opinion, is to get in front of people, to be able to have personal experience. We're just shy, like I said, of 80,000 kilometers at this point. To have that personal experience of going pretty well everywhere you can, talking with all sorts of different EV drivers and EV associations and industry folks, and then take that to essentially the doorsteps of Canadians across the country so that they don't have to go search that information out. We're just saying, here's our story, here's our information, we're immersed in this industry. Ask all the questions you want from somebody face-to-face who actually knows what they're talking about, as opposed to just people randomly searching for what may or may not be real information on the internet about an industry that they don't really know how to ask the right questions for. So to have information on how to think about your road trips from an EV perspective, from somebody who's done the Great Canadian EV Road Trip, we can just be able to pour that information into folks so that they don't have to figure it out the hard way.
And another quick thing about the cars and coffee is like we're actually making coffee on the tailgate of the trucks. We're driving a giant power bank. We have outlets. We have all this capability, and that's something really cool to show off. Is we don't have a propane stove anymore. We've got an electric hot plate, an electric kettle. We've got a coffee maker. We can just like have hot beverages going. It's pretty awesome.
Yep.
So you've covered a lot of mileage across the entire country. Are there any highlights that stick out from your trip?
So many.
Yeah, that's a long list. We saw that question that you sent over. Like, how do we pinpoint the top?
I know it's that question that you ask people kind of like, what's the highlight? And there, you could never really pick one, right? But if you could pick one or two, or just maybe randomly share a couple of experiences.
We live in such a beautiful, diverse country. Like the landscapes are absolutely stunning. We've had the privilege to see so many incredible things. I think one of my highlights was seeing icebergs in Newfoundland. We worked really hard to go find some of the very, very first ones of the season way up in the north. And it was just so
earlier and earlier now, actually.
So rewarding to see them, and just like stunning how huge they are. And thinking about how long that ice has been there, and now it's here in front of us, like just amazing.
Yeah.
So many highlights, though.
I would say for me, it's been just connecting with the various EV associations across the country. Mm-hmm. When we started, the intention was to make some sort of impact in some way. There was a big question mark on like what this would actually do. And through this whole journey, we actually made it to Labrador, made it to Newfoundland, and the then president of the EV Society heard about our trip, and we reached out to him and lined up a coffee, and he's like, you guys are basically doing all the work that the EV Society is doing. Not only that, but we need like a liaison to go and talk to all the EV associations across the country. Why don't you just become board directors for the EV Society as their liaison, and then just continue doing your trip, but we'll give you the hat. Which was a lie. We didn't get a hat. We got t-shirts, but
you got something. Maybe hats come next year.
Yeah, exactly. And so that happened, and they elected both Nicole and I to the board of directors for the EV Society. And now we're like officially the chapter liaisons to go and essentially distill all the information that we get from all the different associations across the country, various professionals and industry leaders, and then provide the information to the different locations and different groups across the country when and how they need it. So that's been really cool to just be able to share various contacts and information as we kind of intended to at the start, to just help the rest of the country electrify that much faster.
Mm-hmm. Well, Richard and Nicole, I'm so grateful for you both coming on and talking to us on the podcast. This was such a phenomenal interview, and I'm sure so useful to our listeners. And before I let you go, I do want to know what your plans are for the future. So you say you're kind of at the very end of your trip. You're heading back to Vancouver very soon. What does the future look like?
Well, we're heading very, very soon. We're actually going to be hopping on the Inside Passage ferry. That's going to go and take us from Prince Rupert all the way back down to Port Hardy on Vancouver Island. So it's kind of the shortcut to getting back. That'll be great. And then we're going to be looking to plan a couple of Christmas-related events in the Lower Mainland before we head to spend Christmas with our families in Edmonton.
And then just that big question about how's it work in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
We want to legitimately be able to give people a personal testimony of how that worked. And so we were talking with the Emotive team, and they're on board to kind of give us a mini extension on finishing off our deliverables so that we can go and do like some ski resort days during the winter.
How can our listeners follow along on your journey?
We have a few different platforms that we're using. Our website is www.evroadtrip.ca. So it's an electric vehicle on a road trip in Canada, evroadtrip.ca. We're also on Facebook and Instagram, EV Road Trip. I think Instagram is evroadtrip.ca. Yeah. We have a YouTube channel. We're also on LinkedIn, but the posts, if we're doing some more events, they're typically posted on our website as well. And so you can get a hold of us.
Well, we'll put some links in our show notes for our listeners so that they can find you easily. And again, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And I wish you the best on the rest of your journey.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks so much, Crystal. It's been a lot of fun. Really appreciate it.
Very much appreciate it. Awesome. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the EV Life podcast. Make sure that you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to join the conversation, you can always do so in the EV Life group on the AMA mobile app. We'll talk to you in the next episode.